summer of 1998, the Thompson family decided to take a break from their daily routines and spend a weekend away from civilization, immersing themselves in the tranquil atmosphere of the picturesque Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in northern Washington state. John and Sarah, both in their 40s, had always dreamed of a short escape from the hustle and bustle of life in Seattle, and summer seemed like the perfect time to fulfill those plans. Their 8-year-old daughter, Emily, was equally excited. She loved being outdoors and eagerly explored the wonders of nature. The Gifford-Pinchot Forest, stretching over thousands of acres of wild terrain, had long attracted nature lovers with its towering, ancient trees, vast hiking trails, and wildlife. The Thompsons decided to camp at a small, secluded campsite by one of the lakes, where they could enjoy the closeness to nature, far away from noise and technology. It was one of those rare summer weekends when everything felt perfect. The sky was clear, the temperature pleasantly warm, and the air smelled of pine resin and the freshness of morning dew. Emily, full of energy, ran around the tent, collecting pine cones and colorful leaves to take back to school to show her friends. She was social, curious about the world, and loved every opportunity to discover new places. This weekend, she dreamed of seeing wild animals she had heard about from her father: deer, squirrels, and maybe even a rare eagle that had its nest near the lake. Emily's parents were fully prepared to spend time outdoors. John, an avid hiker, wore sturdy hiking boots and carried a backpack filled with essential gear: flashlights, maps, a compass, and even a spare rain jacket, despite the forecast predicting beautiful weather. Sarah, who valued peace and relaxation more, brought a book and a cozy blanket, planning to spend the afternoon reading by the lake. In the morning, after a peaceful night spent under the stars, the family decided to take a hike along one of the less traveled trails deeper into the forest. John led the way with a map in hand, while Emily followed, hopping from rock to rock and peeking into every nook and cranny they passed. Sarah walked just behind them, leisurely admiring the majesty of the surrounding nature. The tall trees whose branches formed an almost impenetrable canopy overhead, and the silence broken only by the song of birds. As they delved deeper into the forest, the atmosphere became increasingly mysterious. Sunbeams filtering through the dense leaves created long shadows on the ground, and the air took on a cooler, damp quality. However, the family remained carefree, enjoying the moment. Emily occasionally asked her parents about the animals, wondering if they might see the tracks of a wolf or other signs of wildlife. Around noon, they reached a small clearing where they decided to take a short break. They spread out a blanket, took out sandwiches and juice, and savored the moment of peace and disconnection from the world. Emily, as was her custom, quickly grew bored of sitting and began exploring the nearby trees. Her parents, convinced that their daughter wouldn't wander far, continued their conversation, unaware of what was about to happen. A moment later, when Sarah looked in the direction where she last saw Emily, she realized her daughter was missing. Initially, they did not panic, assuming the girl was simply hiding somewhere nearby. John stood up and called her several times, but there was no response. As the minutes passed and Emily didn't return, both began to feel a sense of unease. After several hours of fruitless searching, their carefree mood turned into panic. They started shouting her name, scouring every bush and path. John ran further into the woods while Sarah searched the nearby area of the clearing with a flashlight. All was in vain. Desperate and filled with fear, they finally decided to call for help. They began calling her name, combing through every bush and path. John ran deeper into the woods voici, all named Doritrin, while Sarah, flashlight in hand, searched the nearby area of the clearing. Every call echoed in vain in the forest wilderness, and fear grew in their hearts. As time passed, disturbing sounds began to dominate the surrounding forest. The rustling wind sounded increasingly terrifying, and the birds that had previously accompanied them on their hike had fallen silent. Realizing they had no leads, their desperate situation forced them to make a decision. John, swallowing hard, called the local police station to report his daughter missing. He was convinced that every second was crucial. The police quickly responded to their call, and shortly after, a patrol car arrived at the scene. When the officers got out of the car, The sight of the terrified family evoked their sympathy. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, recounted how quickly Emily had disappeared and how they had searched the area. The officers promised to organize a search operation and began formulating a strategy. They summoned local emergency services and volunteers willing to help with the search. Night fell swiftly, and the thick darkness of the forest seemed overwhelming. Although the officers set up floodlights to illuminate the area, their beams couldn't penetrate the darkness concealed by the dense trees. Emily still showed no signs of life. The rustling wind resembled whispering voices that seemed to accuse the parents of negligence. The search continued throughout the night. A group of volunteers combed every nook and cranny, and tracking dogs sniffed paths that might lead to Emily. John couldn't sit still. He kept calling for his daughter, hoping to hear her laughter, while anxiety grew in his heart. Sarah, in turn, tried to remain calm, but with each failed shout, her hopes dwindled. By morning, after a long night filled with uncertainty, the search was still fruitless. The police decided to hold a press conference to inform the local community about Emily's disappearance. Everyone in the area began to get involved. Neighbors, friends, even those who had previously had no contact with the family joined the search group. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and concerns for the girl's safety intensified. With each passing day without news, the Thompson family became increasingly desperate. Every message that reached their ears brought new hopes, only to be shattered by reality. John and Sarah did not leave the area, constantly searching the nearby woods, their eyes filled with exhaustion and fear. After 3 days of intense searching, when signs of exhaustion appeared on their faces, an unexpected turn came. Early in the morning, just before sunrise, Sarah heard distant sounds coming from the dense forest. Her heart raced. She knew she had to check what was happening. As she traversed the dark corners, a sudden surge of hope hit her that it might be Emily. John noticed how Sarah suddenly froze, her face turning pale as paper. "I hear something," she exclaimed, holding her breath. John immediately rushed to her side, and a spark of hope flickered in their eyes. Hope they had longed for so desperately. As they approached the sound, they heard it more clearly. A soft, intermittent call echoing through the woods. It was the name of their daughter, Emily. As soon as they reached the source of the sound, their hearts momentarily stopped. Among the trees stood Emily, looking somewhat disoriented, but radiating joy at the same time. She was whole and healthy, as if she had spent her time in another dimension, rather than in the wilderness. Her eyes sparkled, and her lips formed a wide smile. "Mom! Dad!" she cried, running toward them. Her parents, unable to believe their eyes, fell to their knees and embraced her tightly. Tears of joy streamed down their cheeks, and the exhaustion and fear that had plagued them for the last few days suddenly gave way to immense relief. John and Sarah couldn't believe their daughter was back with them. "Where have you been? What happened?" they asked almost simultaneously, holding her in their arms. However, Emily didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be in a trance. When she finally managed to speak, the meaning of her words was so unbelievable that it shook the whole family and foreshadowed what was to come. "The lights took me," she said, her voice carrying a mix of wonder and excitement. John and Sarah, still holding her in their arms, looked at each other with uncertainty. What could she have meant? What lights was their 8-year-old daughter talking about after disappearing into the woods for the past few days? After a moment of joy at finding Emily, the family began to retreat from the forest, heading back toward the campsite. The air felt lighter, and the sun was rising over the horizon, but in the hearts of the Thompsons, concerns still swirled. Sarah, wanting to understand what might have happened, gently asked, "Emily, what exactly happened? Where were you for those 3 days?" Emily was silent for a moment, as if trying to organize her thoughts. Finally, she began to speak, and her story was both fascinating and terrifying. "I knew I shouldn't go further, but something pulled me. I saw bright lights flickering between the trees. I couldn't resist them. When I approached them, I felt like I was in another world. Emily described how she followed those strange lights that drew her in. Her memories became increasingly intricate, and the sounds that accompanied her on this journey were difficult to understand. There were strange creatures. They didn't look like people. They had long legs and big, glowing eyes. I felt they wanted to take me, but they weren't evil. They told me something. I didn't hear words, but I felt their thoughts in my head. Her parents listened, stunned by what they heard. What was going on in this little girl's mind? Was it just a child's imagination, or had she truly experienced something extraordinary? "How long were you there?" John asked, trying to remain calm, even though his heart was racing. "I don't know," Emily replied. "Time was different. It felt like I was there for a moment, but when I came back, I realized it was several days." After a long silence filled with uncertainty, the family returned to their campsite, where their car was parked. As they approached, a small group of people from the search team gathered to welcome them with applause and tears of joy. Many knew Emily had returned, but few understood what she had experienced. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the Thompsons stood together, still in shock but grateful to be reunited. The shadow of fear that had hung over them for days began to dissipate, though the memory of those terrifying moments would stay with them for a long time. In the following weeks, Emily's story sparked conversations throughout the town. Was it just a child's imagination, or was there something more mysterious lurking in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest? Local legends began to resurface, talking about lights in the forest, strange creatures, and encounters with the unknown. The forest, previously only a place of nature's beauty, had gained a new dimension of intrigue. Though the Thompsons returned to their everyday lives, they would never forget the weekend that changed everything for them. While Emily played with her friends and John and Sarah returned to work, they often reflected on their time in the forest and the mysteries that unfolded there. Years later, during family gatherings, they would tell the story of the summer weekend that had turned their lives upside down. Their adventure was filled with fear, but it ultimately deepened their bond as a family and left them with more questions than answers. What truly happened in those woods? Was Emily's experience a product of her imagination, or a glimpse into something that remained forever unexplained? The Gifford-Pinchot National Forest became a place of magic for them, a symbol of their courage, love, and the incredible bond that no force in this world could ever break. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. If you have your own story, experiences, or evidence related to UFOs, please email us. Your story is important and can help others who have had similar experiences. UFO X-Files connects us. You are not alone.